It's Friday, October 28th. From inside the WTOP newsroom, this is the DMV Download, brought to you by the men and women of Steamfitters Local 602. Get an estimate and learn more at steamfitters-602.org. Today, I sit down with Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis to talk about an issue that doesn't get the kind of coverage that some may feel it deserves: the safety of walking along the streets. Fairfax has lost 18 pedestrians so far this year, which he says could mean new traffic laws should be considered.
Certainly automated speed enforcement is something that's coming to Northern Virginia. It's something that's coming to Fairfax County.
And while focus is on big cases out of Fairfax County that we talk about, like the killing of Hannah Choi and yesterday's arrest of a bus driver who was suspected of driving kids on a school bus while drunk, Davis says there's work going on to stop smaller incidents like car theft, which is the leading crime in the county.
When we started that squad at the end of March, beginning of April, we were up in stolen cars by about 46%. And now we're up about 10%.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Cloherty. Luke is off today. Wednesday night, 40-year-old Elise Ballard was trying to cross the road, taking her chances by zipping across busy Route 7 outside the crosswalk just before 10 o'clock when she was hit by a speeding driver. Police say that when the driver of the 2017 Infiniti SUV hit her, that driver pulled over to call for help, but then she was hit again by another car. Ballard died in the road, and that was obviously shut down for hours for an investigation afterwards. This comes days after an SUV driver hit a 52-year-old woman in Lorton, and a 63-year-old woman was hit off West Ox Road a few days before that. Elise Ballard is the 17th person to die in a crash so far this year as a pedestrian in Fairfax County. And with me now is Chief Kevin Davis of the Fairfax County Police Department. He graciously came in to talk about this problem that Fairfax is facing when it comes to pedestrian safety. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the Ballard accident and sort of the circumstances of that, because she was outside the crosswalk, which then it's like, okay, well, you shouldn't do that. But 17 people in this year, it makes you kind of wonder what's going on.
Yeah, Megan, actually, it's 18 pedestrians.
Is it?
18. Oh. So, we take great interest in all pedestrians that are struck by motor vehicles, whether they're struck non-fatally or fatally.
Right.
And while our overall pedestrian crashes are down this year compared to last, we have a marked increase in pedestrian fatalities. So we're at 18. And, they kind of have some common themes.
Okay.
And it's important for your listeners to know what some of those themes are, I think. And that's why, I appreciate the opportunity to share some statistics, because I think the statistics can inform our behaviors. So 12 of our 18 pedestrians who have been killed this year are 40 and older. And, that might go against some assumptions folks have about a profile, if you will. There is no profile. But
right, it's like not that they're not all teenagers just trying to beat the traffic.
No. 11 of our 18, Megan, are females.
Okay.
So far this year, 11 of our 18 have been determined to be at fault in the crash, and certainly that's sometimes tough to talk about because they're no longer with us. But
right.
10 of our 18 fatalities, the pedestrians have been outside of the crosswalk. So it's really, really important to drive home the absolute necessity to look for the crosswalk, to find the crosswalk, and to cross when it's safe to do so, and to wear some reflective, bright clothing. It's, we're almost hitting, we're going to be falling back another hour really soon. So
the amount of accidents that we see jump up from the WTOP Traffic Center when you have that sort of glaring sun in the afternoon,
absolutely. It's
harder to see. And then people are wearing dark clothing and you're not expecting them to be there. It's awful, though, to your point about blaming the pedestrian. I mean, shouldn't we all just be driving slower and looking more?
Absolutely. We should drive less distracted. We should slow down. We should be more aware. And my good friend, Chief Rob Conti, was just on the news yesterday talking about, some Halloween tips. And a lot of the Halloween tips are consistent with some of the recommendations that I have about pedestrian safety. You really have to walk where it's lit, look for crosswalks, wear bright and reflective clothing, and if you can avoid being in those dark places at night, you should. But to our drivers, slow down, pay attention, get off your phone, don't text and drive. Our motors unit yesterday was out and about throughout Fairfax County, and they wrote 280 citations in one day.
For what?
Speed, distracted driving, particularly folks on their cell phones, unsafe lane changes. So I spoke to a judge a few months ago, and he told me that he has seen, especially during COVID and even post-COVID, less folks on his docket for traffic offenses. But he did say that the speeds he's seeing of the motorists that we are citing are higher than he can ever remember. So we're making a concerted effort in Fairfax County. We're going to write you tickets if you speed, if you make unsafe lane changes, if you tailgate, if you drive distracted. The end of 2022 and certainly throughout 2023, traffic enforcement is going to be a top priority for the Fairfax County Police Department. Too many people are dying.
In the case of Elise Ballard, she was hit. The driver then pulls over like into a parking lot nearby to call for help, but she's still in the road. And then someone else hit her, probably not seeing that she was there. If you are in a scenario where you see someone has been hit or there's something in front of you, you know what I mean, that's in the road that someone should know about, as a driver, what do you do? Do you like block lanes?
Drivers panic. Hopefully that's something that doesn't happen to folks,
right?
If ever, or rarely. But don't panic. Stay where you are, and if you have the ability to render aid to the person that you just struck. That you might be able to save that person's life, particularly if there's bleeding, and you can stop the bleeding and call 911. But stay where you are. Put your hazards on. Make sure your lights are on.
Okay. Stay
where you are. Sometimes people panic and they drive away. That's happened on more than one occasion. But we've actually in 2022 versus 2021, we've written 6,000 more citations this year compared to last, and we've issued 7,000 more warnings this year compared to last.
Does that make a difference?
We have about 400 fewer crashes overall.
Oh.
But what we're seeing, though, we have fewer pedestrian crashes this year compared to last, but we have more deaths. So it's the speed of the motorists and certainly the decisions pedestrians make. And they're not intentionally making bad decisions. No one wants to get struck by a motor vehicle, but they're being careless. And they're thinking that they can prevail in a collision with a motor vehicle, and you just can't. The human body's way too fragile.
Let's talk about Route 7 because it's a busy area. Obviously, there's businesses there. There's apartment buildings there. There's a lot more there than used to be there. And it's no surprise there's more foot traffic. What can be done to better protect pedestrians? I mean, is it the police's job just to sit along Route 7 and ticket people? Or how do you make...
we don't have the capacity to sit anywhere,
right?
Whether it's traffic offenses or crime trends and patterns. But we're working with the Fairfax County FCDOT, Department of Transportation, to see what we can do if there are environmental designs that we can alter. What can we do to...
Like speed cameras or something like that?
Well, certainly automated speed enforcement is something that's coming to Northern Virginia. It's something that's coming to Fairfax County. But if we can, take a look at the crosswalks and make sure that they're up to date in terms of being freshly marked, if there's some type of reflective things that we can do for the roadway, Fairfax County is committed to doing that because right now we're sitting at 18 pedestrian deaths. That's way too high.
Yeah.
The bulk of them have really occurred since it's been getting darker earlier. And we're about to go into a period with, coming up, I think this weekend or next, where we're falling back another hour. So it's going to get darker even earlier. And it kind of coincides, this message coincides, and I mentioned Chief Conti, it coincides with Halloween. Make sure that you wear some reflective clothing. There's all types of things you can do to put devices on your clothing, whether you're walking or running or on a bicycle. And our bicycle crashes and our bicycle fatalities are at 0 this year. So that's some good news.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's really good news. And I stood with the chairman, Jeff McKay, recently, and we held a news conference to talk about bicycle safety. I even... And I'm still recovering. I rode 19 miles on a bicycle last weekend. And, Supervisor Dan Stork has an annual bike tour, and I did that. And
you're still.
I'm glad it was 19 miles and not 20.
Well, I think that was the day we had Jeff McKay in here, and it was a really good interview if y'all want to go back and listen to it. But that was the Take a Moment campaign, I believe.
Take a Moment.
Is
Absolutely.
that it?
Take a Moment. And really, the Take a Moment was geared toward motorists. Take a moment and realize that there could be a bicyclist not only crossing in front of you, but right next to you.
Right, like coming up quickly and you don't see them. Yeah.
That Take a Moment campaign coincides with what we're going to be doing bigger and better with pedestrian safety. Everybody should take a moment, slow down, get here early like I did for this interview, right?
Yes,
I
you
took a
surprised me.
moment. I was early.
You
I caught you
surprised
off guard.
me in my moment, yeah. I wonder, too, I mean, if you look at other jurisdictions, D.C., for example, is changing its laws that you can no longer take a right on red eventually, and they're starting to put up signs already because of that idea that someone, is going to quickly whip around that corner and not see there's a bike next to them or a pedestrian crossing.
Megan, the thing I like about that law change is when we know we can stop on red and then turn on red after we look, we're more inclined to go into that turn and then stop. So just think about where your two front tires are when you're preparing to stop, hopefully, completely stop, and then turn red. You're going to go up a little bit into that turn, and sometimes that's where the crosswalk is. That's where the pedestrian is. That's where the bicyclist is. So I really like that the D.C. took that move. I know Fairfax County will consider any and everything that we can, whether it's legislation or environmental design or enforcement. Enforcement's a piece of it, but education is kind of the big picture.
Do you think that should be a law in Fairfax County? I mean, would that make things safer?
I think anything should be considered that makes our roadways safer for both pedestrians and bicyclists and motor vehicles.
I was looking on Twitter because Fairfax County often tweets, this is the area we're responding to right now. This is what we have, the initial details of an investigation. And when it came to Elise Ballard's story, there's a ton of comments on there from people who are genuinely concerned about that area, the Route 7 area in Falls Church. One person suggested a pedestrian bridge be constructed over Route 7, similar to the one that just opened over 495 between Leesburg Pike and Chainbridge Road in the Tysons area, which actually is also bike-friendly. Would you be open to that, or do you think you have any influence with the Board of Supervisors saying, hey, these are really bad areas in our community. Yeah. This is where we need to make some changes infrastructure-wise.
Yeah, we're one big team. And I recently, before I drove over here to the Glass Enclosed Nerve Center, is it still called that?
It is still called that.
I was with Supervisor Penny Gross, and we were having a conversation of what more can we do. Now, we is not just the police. It's the government. It's FCDOT. It's so many other partners. So we're willing to do and look and consider anything that makes our roadways safer. You know how crowded Fairfax County is. I think, conservatively 1.3 million residents. And then you add people into the equation who work here and commute and drive through Fairfax County. It's the area's most populated jurisdiction, and we need to continue to lead the way when it comes to safety measures. And Fairfax County has always been proud to do that. We have the largest motorcycle unit in the metropolitan area when it comes to police departments. And, we so far this year when it comes to DUI enforcement, I'm more than happy to talk about the bus driver yesterday, very sad story. But we arrest 3.5 people a day for drunk driving.
3.5, so a half a person?
Half a person. It's math.
That's
a big commitment.
Average of
three
people a day-ish.
Yeah. And yesterday, the school bus driver that we arrested, I don't know if you know this, I think Jackie Benson reported it on Channel 4, but his blood alcohol content was 0.20. That's outrageous.
So this is the story. This is the story of a school bus driver it was a charter bus, basically, that a DC elementary school, middle school, merch school, basically, hired the bus company to take the kids to a pumpkin patch and back. And he ends up going off the road, hitting a rock. Thank God nothing worse happened. But it was, you see a school bus accident and you get very nervous. And it ended up that he had a blood alcohol level, it was like 1.5 times, right?
0.20, yeah.
Over what?
More than twice.
Yeah.
And then, we suspect he may have been smoking marijuana as well, so that's all under investigation. His license was actually revoked in Virginia because of a previous DWI, and his license was suspended in the state of Maryland. So there's no way on God's green earth he should have been driving that school bus, and there were 44 kids, young children on that bus, and some of them suffered some bumps and bruises. It happened right next to our police academy, Megan. So when that bus was out of service, the bus that was with it couldn't accommodate the additional children. So we brought all the kids to our police academy, and they got to hang out with a bunch of Fairfax County cops for a couple hours, and we ended up getting them home. But what a long day for those kids and those parents, and all because the school wanted to do something nice for those children that they'll probably remember forever and take them to a pumpkin patch.
Right.
And that's a pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah.
But the adults who are charged with our children's safety, have to be vetted, have to be scrutinized, and it's outrageous behavior to drive drunk, period, but especially when you're transporting 44 kids.
What happens? Obviously, we know this driver is facing charges. What about the company that allowed him to drive?
Yeah, I think that's all going to be part of the investigation, or certainly the review. But yeah, he should never be behind a wheel, whether it's a bus or a motor vehicle. Again, he's lost that privilege. And driving is a privilege. It's not a right.
Yeah. Just to finalize this pedestrian education effort, I mean, are there certain areas that you think, gosh, I'd take another second before I cross that street?
There's a few clusters, Route 1 and Centerville and Reston. There's the pedestrian and motor vehicle crashes are spread throughout Fairfax County.
Right.
But there are certainly some trends and patterns, and where you see more people walking, that's where you're going to have more, particularly of the pedestrian crash and fatal and non-fatal issues.
Wondering about the Silver Line extension. So we don't have a date yet. We were all eager to hear one yesterday. We didn't get one. But hopefully the Silver Line extension will be opening around Thanksgiving, which just means more traffic and more pedestrians around those specific stations, right? Yeah. Obviously, this is a Metro Transit Police issue. But when it comes to the roads around the stations, that's you guys.
That's us.
What are you preparing at all? Is there more patrol expected in because again, for the holidays, it's going to be crazier.
Yeah, Mike Gonzalo is the police chief of the Metropolitan Transit Police Department, and he sends one of his captains, a guy named Rob Brewer. And I've known Mike Gonzalo, Chief Gonzalo, and the captain that he sends to our weekly crime meetings routinely. And we discuss these issues. What's going to be the impact of the extended Silver Line? We talk all the time about what's going on in and around Tyson's. So we've had some great successes because of our partnership with Metro Transit Authority Police Department. That's a mouthful. Sometimes
it's a lot.
Sometimes I twist it. But they do a great job with outreach to the affected police departments, and our relationship couldn't be stronger with them. And from that, we should have a safer environment, whether it's motor vehicles, crashes, whether it's robberies, whether it's automobile thefts, thefts from automobiles. That's the biggest crime. It's the thefts from motor vehicles. And we've had some successes based on our partnership with Metro Transit.
Are there areas that you haven't seen a lot of activity that now will see much more activity when those stations open?
I'm not sure.
Okay. It's hard to tell.
Sure. Yeah, it is hard to tell. It's hard to tell the impact and the interest. One of the things we always try to do is predictive analysis.
Yeah.
What some people say is pie in the sky, but it's really not, because crime trends and patterns move. Because if police are effective in one area with enforcement or education, it's going to move. And I'm thinking particularly the theft of automobiles. And we've done really, really well this year because we created for the first time a full-time auto theft team.
Right.
The ACE Squad, Auto Crimes Enforcement Squad.
Did you just name it that so you could call it the ACE Squad?
Well, they wanted to call it the ACE Squad, and I said, it's a cool name, but you got to live up to your cool name, and you got to reduce auto thefts in Fairfax County, and they have. When we started that squad at the end of March, beginning of April, we were up in stolen cars by about 46%.
Yikes.
And now we're up about 10%. So they've greatly slowed the rate of auto thefts. And we did something else unique, and we formed a catalytic converter task force, because catalytic converters and the precious metals are worth so much.
Yeah.
We've greatly slowed the thefts of catalytic converters.
That is such an interesting crime because it takes like 10 seconds to get those things.
Absolutely.
It's so fast.
And we've partnered with some local body shops, and they're engraving some catalytic converters for folks. Of course, you think it can never happen to you, but it can happen to you.
Engraving them?
They engrave them with identifying marks so we can recover them and tie them to a particular crime so we can charge someone with that crime.
Like a VIN?
A VIN or social security number, driver's license number.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so we've had some successes with that, and we've made some arrests with that as well. So, when a crime trend and pattern kind of sneaks up on you, you've got to do something proactive to stop it, because, the weather, Megan, is inevitable. Crime is not inevitable. That's where the police can do something about it. So we have to be proactive.
People are bringing their cars in to be engraved while the catalytic converters are still in there?
Our district commanders, several of our district commanders have identified body shops in their patrol districts. So what we ask them to do, and they do it out of the goodness of their hearts, is they'll engrave like your driver's license number on your catalytic converter. So if someone steals your catalytic converter and we later find it in the back of someone's trunk or truck, we'll be able to tie that catalytic converter back to you. It's good. It's good. It's a good community partnership, business partnership, and we're proud to do it. I'm sure other jurisdictions are doing it as well.
Coming up after the break, I continue my conversation with Chief Davis, talking specifically about where the investigation into Hannah Choi's killing stands and what role police play in the upcoming elections. Backed by the experience of its hardworking members, Steamfitters Local 602 is ready to take on your next commercial heating, cooling, HVAC, or refrigeration project. Steamfitters Local 602 adds value to our community through its partnerships with local contractors and building owners, all while keeping the focus on improving the lives of its members and their families throughout the DMV. For work that's on time and on budget, go to steamfitters-602.org to schedule your next project. That's steamfitters-602.org. Steamfitters Local 602, changing lives.
Explain your DNA on 10 cases, man.
You're inside the police interrogation room with the alleged Potomac River rapist.
I'm not guilty on any of this stuff.
So calm, so reasonable. Could this be the man who terrorized women for 9 years before murdering a brilliant scientist 2 decades ago? Experience one of the most fascinating true crime podcasts available. Join crime reporter Paul Wagner for Unknown Subject, Season 3 of WTOP's American Nightmare series. Search American Nightmare Podcast on all podcast platforms.
Back now with Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis, talking about teen crime, possibly car crime. They're kind of intertwined. Last night, someone shot out the windows of more than 11 cars in Falls Church and 50 in nearby Arlington with a BB gun. It seems like a harmless teen crime, but if it's you and it's your car, it's expensive and annoying. And it also kind of gives people a sense of like, am I not safe in my neighborhood? What's going on here? What's with that investigation? What's being done about that?
So that's underway right now. Inevitably, we'll get tips from the community about that. Anytime something like that happens, we tend to get tips. But anytime the sanctity of your home or your car is violated, it makes you feel differently about where you live. It really does. I always, one of my several sayings is, if your car is stolen or broken into, or if your house is broken into, or if you have graffiti and blight in your neighborhood, it makes you consider putting up a for sale sign in your front yard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those crimes matter. Not all those crimes make the 6 o'clock news, but those are the crimes that matter. And we're committed. And again, you mentioned earlier that Fairfax County is the safest, largest jurisdiction in the country, and we still are, present tense. So when you take the raw number of crimes that you divide it into our huge population, that's where you come up with that ranking. It doesn't mean that we're resting on our laurels, or it doesn't mean we're not striving to get better. But we do enjoy a relatively low crime rate given our population, but we have so much more to do. We don't have the carjackings in Fairfax County that other jurisdictions have. So far this year, we have 19 carjackings compared to 15 at the same time last year. So those numbers pale in comparison to some other jurisdictions, and it's something that we just have to continue to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
So young people who go out with their peers, and there's an element of peer pressure associated with it as well, and then they have access to firearms and they choose to carry guns, bad things happen. And if you remember the name Noah Settles was the one who fired several shots inside of Tyson's on a Saturday afternoon this past summer, and thank God Noah Settles didn't hit anyone, and he's still incarcerated, no bond, awaiting trial, but that could have been much, much worse. So something goes on in a young person, and it's typically a young man's thought process. I'm going to go out today, and I may or may not do someone harm, but I'm going to carry a gun with me. So that the access to that firearm really makes what would otherwise be a verbal confrontation, or in the days gone by, a fist fight, turn into gunplay. And that's where society is right now.
Juvenile crime on the whole, it's something, as you mentioned, that other jurisdictions really are struggling with. And I think we talked about domestic crime and involving juveniles more so than it had in the past in your county. Is that still the case?
So our young people are disproportionately involved in thefts from automobiles. And we just put out some really good Ring doorbell footage, I think last night, on social media. But theft from automobiles and automobile thefts are disproportionately committed by young people, not just here in Fairfax County, but anywhere. But I think public safety, law enforcement in particular, we're charged with interrupting criminal behaviors. And I think the larger criminal justice system has to really focus on how do you, after we interrupt that behavior, how do you stop it? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's incarceration, sometimes it's rehabilitation, sometimes it's both. But interrupting that criminal misconduct is so important for our communities.
Fairfax County, I mean, speaking of interruption, Fairfax County has school resource officers. A lot of areas have done away with those. I'm interested to ask about last month when a lot of high school kids walked out of school in response to Governor Youngkin's move to change the Board of Education's policies when it comes to parents' rights and how transgender children are treated or identify or, their rights in school. What kind of role, if anything, did school resource officers play on that day? And when it comes to sort of that civil disobedience that kids want to take part in, are they preventing? Are they interrupting? Are they trying to facilitate it? How does that work?
I think the biggest thing school resource officers do here in Fairfax and elsewhere is we have a presence. So we have 52 school resource officers in Fairfax County. It's the gold standard SRO program in the country. And I don't say that lightly. It's really the best of the best. And the conversation about getting SROs out of the schools never occurred with me in the room. And I don't know of any elected officials in Fairfax County who ever seriously had that conversation. And I think that's only because they're so well aware of the quality of our school resource officer program. It's not uncommon every year to have a school resource officer be chosen by the students to be a commencement speaker at an academy graduation.
That's cool.
That's big. That's big stuff. So it works here. I think it works elsewhere. And whether it's Alexandria or Montgomery, you can see they've kind of made a U-turn away from that moment. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes when we're in the midst of all the conversations that occurred during and following the summer of 2020, probably necessary conversations, but some decisions were made ultimately that probably weren't the best for public safety. And I remain, and I think Fairfax County generally remains a big proponent of having public safety in our schools. AVI threats, active violence incident threats, those occur more often than they ever have.
Yeah.
And our police officers are in the schools to interact with students and take those tips so we can act upon them to stop things before they go boom.
Shifting over to some past crimes that I just want to touch on and kind of see where things stand. I don't think you'll be surprised that I'm asking about the investigation into Hannah Choi's killing. For our listeners, she was a 35-year-old woman whose body was found in Prince George's County in a park this past spring. She went missing in March after she and her boyfriend, who she'd just broken up with, had like a goodbye dinner, and then the next day she was gone. 35-year-old Joel Marino is charged in her death. And back in May, you said you believe you knew where he was, but there was a question of, finding him, basically. Where does this investigation stand right now?
So I knew, Megan, you were going to ask me back about that, and I'm glad you did. So he actually pronounces his name Joel.
Okay, thank you.
Joel Marino. He's wanted. We have an arrest warrant for second-degree murder for Joel Marino. We know where he is. We can't get to him right now, and that's kind of cryptic. But that would probably imply, at least to you and your listeners, that he may or may not be in the country.
Right.
So we're working with federal officials to take Joel Marino into custody. That case is closed in so much as we have a warrant for his arrest. We don't have him yet in custody, and there are a lot of people working at the federal and local levels to make sure that happens. I want to close that for Hannah Choi's family. Just like anyone else, and I'm looking forward to breaking that on your show, if I can.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it must be, and maybe you won't comment on this, but it must be really frustrating to know who your guy is, who obviously deserves a trial, and to see if, he's convicted. He's still innocent until proven guilty, but if you can't get your hands on him and you know who it is and you want that closure, how hard is that from a law enforcement perspective?
Well, it's probably harder for the families than it is for us. I mean, we've done everything we can, or we did everything we could to identify him, and that was a tough case. And now he's wanted. So it's a matter of closure is probably not the best word, because I think that's more of a journey than it is a destination, but it's a step along the way.
Yeah.
For the family.
Yeah.
So we want to see him in a pair of handcuffs in Fairfax County. That relationship between Joel Marino and Hannah Choi, so far this year we have 19 homicides in Fairfax County. We had exactly 19 this same time last year as well. But 9 of our 19, Megan, are domestic related. And that's not inconsistent with where we were last year. 7 of our 21, because we've ended 2021 with 21 homicides, a third of them, 7 out of 21, were adult children living at home with their parents who they ended up killing in their homes. So consistent with last year, we're still seeing domestic-related homicides at a higher rate than years gone by. So the killers are known to their victims, and if it's not a relationship inside the home, it's a former relationship, it's an estranged relationship. But those are always frustrating because somewhere along the way, a family member or a friend is going to tell us, and this is what typically happens, and this is normal pretty much anywhere, I knew this was going to happen. I suspected this might happen.
Ooh, what a horrible feeling to have.
It's a bad feeling. It really is. So that's why we encourage people. Our domestic violence calls for service, Megan, this year, just compared to last, as I read without my reading glasses, assaults on family members by family members are up 20% this year.
What do you
20%.
attribute that to? Is it just,
last year I contemplated the notion of the impact of COVID and the coronavirus, anxiety, depression, isolation. It feels like we're coming out of that moment, but maybe we're not. Maybe we have one foot still in the coronavirus mode.
Yeah. I wonder how much the economy plays a role, because when people start, having to move in with their families and things get expensive and whatever, you put people together who maybe shouldn't be together. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to, there's speculation. Right. There's no point in that, but it is interesting that domestic is getting worse. The same goes with our
earlier topic about the speed of motorists now. So even though law enforcement has in the National Capital Region, and I'm guessing, it's probably the right guess, that all of us have probably written less traffic citations during COVID, but it's the ones that we are writing, the speed, and not only the speed, but the aggressive driving, and by aggressive driving, unsafe lane changes, tailgating, and excessive speed. Those are disproportionately out of whack. And does that have something to do with this whole isolation era as well? The Great Resignation. Some people ask me the same questions about why aren't people applying to be police officers, and my first answer, Megan, is if there was only one answer to that, we would have solved it by now.
Yeah.
But there are many, many factors.
Okay, this is going back to a case that was far before you took the helm. What, a year and a half ago now, huh?
Year and a half, yeah.
Bijan Gazar's killing. In June, we learned that the DOJ is going to decline to reopen a probe into the U.S. Park Police shooting of Bijan Gazar. That crime really, not only rocked our region, but rocked the community. Your department was very transparent in trying to, not only push for the solving of that crime, but the release of evidence from the dash cam that Fairfax released of that incident. That happened under your predecessor, but I wonder, after the fact, now that this decision has been made, do you think that incident has changed how Fairfax County Police interact with U.S. Park Police?
I've had personally a long relationship with the U.S. Park Police. And as a young SWAT operator in Prince George's County, Maryland, on their police department, I attended the U.S. Park Police Helicopter Rappel School. I know a number of their now retired commanders and police officers. And just a few months ago, Megan, their police chief, and her name is escaping me now, and I apologize to her if she's listening, but she was actually the keynote speaker at our academy class graduation while she was the U.S. Park Police Department police chief. So I think the relationships at the top and certainly amongst cops and detectives, cops and detectives interact every day, absent politics.
Well, I was wondering that. How often do you work together? They kind of border you.
GW
but...
Parkway.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's occasional. It's occasional. But I don't think a singular incident will ultimately destroy a relationship. It might cause some tense moments. But, one of the things that we've done in the last year and a half is we've widely advertised our policy that we will release body-worn camera footage following every officer-involved shooting. Now, other jurisdictions do that as well. Mm-hmm. So we've had 6 officer-involved shootings so far this year, and we average 1.5 a year. So 6 is higher than normal. There's no doubt about it. But each and every time, we will put out the complete body-worn camera footage within 30 days. We have We've had one officer-involved shooting within the last 30 days. That was the traffic pursuit that went from Arlington County to Fairfax County, where the shooter in that case was firing shots at Arlington County police officers as they were pursuing him, and then arrived here in Fairfax, got out of his car, and fired many shots at Fairfax County police officers. So all that video footage is going to be released. So, events that happened in the past sometimes inform better and more transparent policy, even within our own organization.
Just going back quickly to the Gaysar thing, because I think I shouldn't say the Gaysar thing. I mean, he was tragically killed. There was a little bit at the time, a loss of trust with police, and it wasn't necessarily toward your department. But I wonder, in incidents like that, which hopefully never happen again, do you think it erodes the trust from your community with your police officers?
Well, I think our nation has been through a lot recently, particularly since the summer of 2020. But I go back really to Ferguson in 2014 with Michael Brown. And then after Michael Brown, the names just roll off the tip of your tongue, whether it's Freddie Gray or Eric Garner or Laquan McDaniel. All those events really, and I think ultimately, will serve to make us a better, more transparent profession that thinks about using force, particularly deadly force, a little bit differently. But when the summer of 2020 hit and George Floyd was murdered, that was the moment. So it sometimes results in moments of tension, and we saw that throughout the country in 2020. But ultimately, communities, and particularly Black and brown communities, want the police, need the police. They want to be respected and treated with dignity. But I've never been in any minority community, and I've served in majority minority communities for the vast majority of my career. I've never been to any community that has told me they don't want to see the police. They don't want police in their neighborhood. They don't want police cars on their streets. It's quite the opposite.
And is that because you're there because something horrible has happened, or in general?
I think sometimes, individuals and families and neighborhoods that are in crisis realize that the role of the police department is to protect and to be that entity that stands between order and chaos. So I was at a one-year vigil just a few days ago of Nelson Alexander. If you remember, Nelson Alexander was a 73-year-old man who was shot and killed at an ATM machine in Annandale. So Nelson Alexander was killed by a young man, I think 15 or 16 at the time. And very, very, very tragic, but it was an African-American church that I was in just a few days ago, and they started off their vigil by speaking directly to the several police officers who were there, to include me. And they said, "We want you, we need you." That's powerful.
Very. Wow. I kind of want to take this and we usually talk to you about things that are awful to talk about, right? I mean,
Sure.
Is there something on your radar, or is there something maybe you guys are doing, I don't know, around the Halloween holiday or something fun that...
Trunk or treat?
It's like it's a good police story.
Yeah, well,
I don't know. Are you dressing up this year?
So I judged a Halloween decorating contest today. That's not going to make the news or anything, but that was fun.
Did it make you feel bad about how badly your house is decorated compared to theirs?
Yes. but no. So the men and women who serve in this profession, whether they're professional staff or sworn, need a boost right now. And
don't we all? Yeah,
we all do, regardless of your profession. So I don't know if this will one day be looked at as people are calling it the Great Resignation era. And certainly, anytime I say to someone that we're having trouble hiring cops, I'll sometimes hear in a retort, "Well, I can't hire waiters, I can't hire construction workers, I can't hire you name it."
Yeah.
But the difference is when we're having challenges hiring public safety, whether it's police or fire, that has an impact on the community in terms of life or death. So I'm certainly empathetic to every profession out there that's having challenges hiring people. I don't know what everyone's doing. I got 4 kids in their 20s, and there's no great resignation is allowed in the Davis household. They all have to be gainfully employed, full-time in college or gainfully employed. But But I think the country's certainly, and even with the traffic congestion, it seems like the motorists are back, and it seems like rush hour is back, and it is back. But
Doesn't it? I mean, even in the last month or so, it just feels like all of a sudden we're in gridlock again.
Yeah, and people have to renew their good driving habits.
Yes,
but we do a lot with our communities. We have community outreach officers. We have crime prevention officers. We do a lot with our community, and we're proud of it. Just yesterday, when we had the near tragedy of the bus crash with a drunk school bus driver, we brought all those kids to the police academy, and we're playing tag and hide and go seek with them for a couple hours.
It ended up being sort of a cool thing.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I'm
it's
glad.
but no, we do good things every day, and it is the norm. It really is. But we have to try to find more time to celebrate those moments.
Last question is we're coming up on elections. I know, nationally there's just so much contention. I don't expect that there would be any problems, and we haven't seen any. But do police have a role to secure polling places? Is there a plan for Election Day that you guys will play a role in that somehow?
There's definitely a plan. We are out of sight and hopefully out of mind unless or until we are needed. We certainly don't want to establish a presence at any polling sites that can be interpreted by anyone as intimidating.
Right.
So that's the last thing we want to do. But we have assets that are nearby. We have plans that are in place. We have extra commanders and supervisors working on these particular days to be able to respond immediately to anything, from a verbal parking dispute to a disruption of some sort that hopefully does not happen. Mm-hmm. But we take that really, really seriously. You probably saw there was a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office just the other day. The FBI arrested a man for crimes committed on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol right here in Fairfax County. So our detectives are part of that task force. Mm. And the U.S. Attorney's Office press release acknowledged our participation. So we are always partnering with people. You can't not partner with people in the National Capital Region. We can't do this alone. And everything. You'd have to have me on another hour to talk about the ongoing, present tense, ongoing Thursday, Friday, and Saturday protests at the three justices' homes who live here in Fairfax County. So they're peaceful, they're lawful, they're orderly, but they still happen every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and we still have to dedicate assets and personnel and make
How
plans.
many officers do you have there if you know it's going to be peaceful?
It's just a few. And again, they're out of sight, out of mind, but we make contact with the organizers just to make sure they know we're there.
Yeah.
So they have been peaceful. And this all started back on May 9th.
I was going to say, how long do you think it's going to go, or do you have any indication?
If I were a betting person, I would have lost a bet, because there's no way I would have bet back in May or June when we were in the heat of that moment that it would still be going on here as we approach the end of October.
Yeah.
So, it still does go on. But, the way it's happening now, the protesters, and they're typically the same protesters, they'll take selfies with cops, they'll give us water bottles, they'll shake our hands, and vice versa. So it's peaceful, it's lawful, but it's still another thing, another responsibility that the police have to take care of that not everyone realizes we have to take care of it on any given day.
Well, we're glad you're out there. Chief Kevin Davis with the Fairfax County Police Department, thank you for coming in and kind of going over what, really is of concern and something to be celebrated in your community.
Happy Halloween, Nate.
Happy Halloween. And this was a really long show, so I'm going to keep our little light part short. I'm going to tell you guys my 3 favorite Halloween candy types, I guess you would call them. Snickers, Reese's Cup, Almond Joy. I bet you didn't suspect that. I hope you have a great Halloween. Hope your kids don't bring home too much candy that you'll have to drop off at the office on Monday. And we will see you back here next week when Luke returns with me on the DMV Download. We are sponsored, of course, by Steam Theaters Local 602. Our managing editor is Craig Schwab, and our music is by Real World. Leave us a review and rate our show if you get the chance, and follow us on social media, where we post content every day from behind the scenes. You can find out more about this podcast and become one of our VIP listeners at dmvdownload.com. The DMV Download is a product of WTOP News. Listen on 103.5 FM in D.C., 107.7 FM in Virginia, 103.9 FM in Frederick, Maryland, online at WTOP.com, and on the WTOP News app. Have a great weekend.